Hello. Can everybody hear me? Great. That's fantastic. I was glad that it worked. My name is Trent Kays. I'm a visiting assistant professor at Hampton-Sydney College, and I will be moderating this session along with two cats. So there's one right now. Come on, get out of here. So I will do my best to keep things going along. A few thoughts before we get started. If you have questions, please save those until everyone is done speaking, or post them in the chat window. Okay, I will do my best to keep up with those so we don't lose any. We have 3 presentations today for this session. We have If I Could Turn Back Time, Students' Perception of Time Management. And I will let our colleagues introduce themselves as they come to speak. We have Academic Mimicry, Ethos in the Age of Digital and Information Literacy, and we have Open Access, WAW Writing About Writing, Theory, Praxis, and Aspiration in First Year Writing. So as questions do arise, I will keep track of those. For each presenter, you have 15 minutes, and I will keep track of the time. Okay. Now, I'm typically not too militant about the time, but since we only have an hour, if you start to go over, I might jump in and say, hey, you're going over. Okay, so let's try to keep it to 15 minutes. And when it's time for Q&A, I will help facilitate that, being sure that all our panel members are given a chance to speak and share. Okay. So I'd like to invite our first individuals for the first paper, there we go, excuse me, to go ahead and share what they have and turn their mics on and lead us in their presentation.
Hi, this is Shelley. Sorry, I'm a little froggy. I will work on sharing. Catrina, if you want to start introducing us.
Sure. My name is Catrina Mitchum, and you just frogged Shelley. Rodrigo. And we are with the University of Arizona. I am a career track lecturer, and Shelley is the Associate Writing Program Administrator for the online version, I guess, of our writing program.
I think I'm trying to share.
Oh, there we go.
Okay, so I can't see.
It's the presentation, but it's not presenting yet.
Okay, how about that?
Yay.
Yay.
Works.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you for introducing us.
Did you want to drop the bit.ly? Because I can't share from. I can't copy paste from your screen.
Interestingly, I can't either, so I'm just going to type it in.
Okay.
And hopefully it's easy enough for everyone too. There we go. So everyone, if you'd like to follow along, please go ahead and go to that link. There are a few action links in the presentation. Okay. Are we feeling like we need to give any other information about us? I don't think so.
I think we do enough in the next slide.
Okay. And now I have to get back over here. There we go.
So we wanted to talk a little bit about kind of how we came to the assessment that we conducted in fall of 2018. So fall of 2017, I was teaching at 3 different institutions, and I was invited to join a research group that was studying student backgrounds and expectations and how those impact students' success in online first-year writing classes. So fall of 2017, we applied for a grant. I picked a home institution. Fast forward to spring of 2018, we won the grant, but I was no longer teaching with my home institution. Fast forward to the end of spring 2018, and I had an offer for a full-time career track position with the University of Arizona. So I contacted Shelley and told her about our study and what we were trying to find out and what we needed to do in order to make it work for us. And we talked about how we could make it work for Arizona.
So at Arizona, I'm the online WPA, and our online undergraduate, well, online writing program, it doesn't matter whether it was 100 level or 300 level, started 3.5 years ago when the entire Arizona online undergraduate program initiated. And we had not done any kind of major assessment beyond something that was just tangentially a part of the larger writing program assessment since we had started. And I decided, I looked at the questions and looked at the methodology and said, hey, getting a sense of students' expectations of the class and then balancing with that with their reflections and how they actually did in the class would not be a bad 3.5-year assessment marker. So let's use this as an assessment for the program, and that one gave me, as the online WPA, a nice framework to do something that I didn't have to build from scratch. Yay, work harder or smarter, not harder. Two, it also then, for Catrina's purposes, because we built it in as a requirement to all the online classes last fall, it gave her a better shot of having a larger N number for the actual separate research study. So basically parallel, overlapping, but still separate. So what our plan was to share some of that data with you. Life happened. Actually, I will take responsibility at this point that, remember I said assessment. And when we proposed for GSOLE, I think we had, and I'll even say I had, illusions of grandeur that we would have enough time to have combined, scrubbed, and actually analyzed the data to have done the internal assessment report that would then allow us to basically ask IRB for approval to use the then scrubbed and data for presentation. And yeah, that just did not happen by January 25th. So what we were planning on sharing with you, don't worry, we've got a good presentation. We promise you'll still enjoy what we have. What we were planning on sharing with you were kind of the key results wrapped around these two questions. One, the question of have you taken online classes before and what are your experiences? And then two, the question of the good student question, what are characteristics do you think it requires for online students to be successful?
So because the assessment surveys were required, and we wanted them to be useful to the instructors that we were kind of giving a top-down, you have to do this, we did a quick analysis in September and October and pushed those out to instructors with some recommendations about what they could do with the data. So both in that analysis and in the analysis that my research group that has an approved IRB has been doing, time and time management are two of the themes that have emerged. So what we would like you to do now is, if you can access it, go straight to this form. If not, I'm going to type it in right now to tell us what you think of when you hear the term time management and how you think online learning impacts that concept. Oh, thanks, Shelley. I was getting there. I can't talk and type at the same time, unfortunately.
And just reminding you, we're not trying to use this to collect data. So we're just using your answers to, we'll a little later return to them and use them to launch a little bit of discussion as part of our presentation, as part of the 15 minutes, still leaving time for the Q&A later. So we're going to give everyone a minute or two here. Okay, so just confirming, everyone, you're only seeing the presentation slide, or are you seeing my entire screen?
You're seeing your browser.
Just the browser. Okay, yay, thank you. Okay, well, that was a few minutes. We probably should feel free to keep writing, especially if you have feelings on this topic. We have more feelings than we thought, and we've had, spent some time feeling more. We'll say that. So this particular slide, so what we're going to do is share a little literature with you. What we realized is in our studies to date in terms of online learning, we had not necessarily spent tons of time thinking of time management. We knew it was there. And this particular quote from Vandermeer, Jensen, and Beek, I'm going to say Beek, we think actually sums up everything we've been thinking thus far as we've been looking at the data and looking at the review of literature, with kind of the emphasis on that, and this is why I think it's fascinating, that both the students know time management is important. This is not shocking to them. They're not shocked that, oh, I need to somehow manage my time. And that they're not expecting to have to work hard. But what they're finding and we're finding is that they need help. It's one thing basically to say time management, you need to manage your time, and it's another thing to actually provide scaffolded activities, instruction, ideas, actions, behaviors to help students manage their time. And what I think, at least for me, I'll share that, again, not surprising to us that time management is important. And we had already even built in some time management element to our online first year composition classes. But what we're finding is like, oh, okay, more. We probably need more. And what we're also potentially thinking about is that we're triple tagged with the time management problem, that it's students, if they're doing foundations or first year writing, it's the beginning of college for them. So they need help knowing and understanding that. And then it's further complicated. It's probably one of their first online classes. And then it's further complicated that writing itself, especially once you start talking about larger writing projects, it also requires time management. So it's kind of this triple ding, but also how important it is. So we didn't put this slide again at the end, but we could have basically ended with this as a conclusion as well.
So there were a lot of definitions of time management, but the ones that we found to be most useful are the ones that talked about time management kind of at its basic level. So as a series of steps to complete. Is this set to go automatically?
Nope. Okay. I have to do it. Sorry.
That's okay. And these steps are often referred to as behaviors because they become something that is actionable that we can do in order to have control over our time. And we start to see that in some of the definitions. Some of the definitions start to specifically outline, what these behaviors are that we should be doing in order to have time management in general.
And so as we were continuing to look at the scholarship and think about, okay, what do we need to revise in our own classes is examples of these behaviors. what do we actually have to? So again, this last definition has an example of the behaviors, but going forward, again, all over the scholarship, and just as that there's a variety of definitions of time management, there's also laundry lists. And the irony of listing or lists being one of the time management behaviors. But yes, that there's just lists of what does it mean to try to manage your time. And my guess is, since we're academics, that these look very familiar to most of us. And we've, tried on many of these before. And we might be, at this point, we're potentially suggesting that we might be behooved to more explicitly share these types of lists and behaviors with our students.
So we have a list of some other considerations about time management that we will keep in mind going forward. The first one is stress, because there are some studies that found that the more in control of their time that students felt, the less stress that they felt. And, there's lots of literature that connects stress and learning. And our online students are busy, and that's why they're in our classes, because they need the flexibility. They need the stress release, or the less stress of having to fit face-to-face classes into their schedule. The second thread was self-regulating behaviors. So some studies found that a lack of self-regulation is actually a reason for a higher dropout rate online. And both time management and self-regulation models focus on some of the same areas. So they focus on setting goals, planning how you're going to reach those goals, and then executing that plan in order to reach those goals. So we'd be looking at some of the crossovers between the self-regulating behaviors and time management. And lastly, while the literature was kind of mixed, some of the literature focused on the impact of cultural concepts of time and how those differences can lead to student self-doubt. That is particularly of interest to us because we are a designated Hispanic serving institution. So it's something that we need to consider in kind of all the assessment and all the decisions that we make.
So let's take the last 3 minutes that we were given the warning. So thank you, Trent, for doing that. And look at some of the results that you all gave. Hold on. Text wrapping. And let's make it bigger. There we go. In terms of time management and online learning. So I haven't looked at this. Can everyone read this? Is it big enough on the screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So let's take a few seconds and see what everyone said. And we have T minus 30 seconds. Yay. Well, I'll just say some of the things I'm seeing here is we're definitely seeing some of those behaviors. People are listing behaviors. And part of what we're suggesting and the literature suggests, and kind of the hint of what later we can share as data suggests, is that students need a little more help with knowing what these are as well.
And how to do them.
Right.
I think.
Yeah.
Okay, well, how do you make an effective to-do list that's going to actually help you get from point A to point B?
Right. And then I think what's interesting, the second one on the right, online needs more time management. And I think this is, interestingly enough, I'm just going to suggest, I think for both us and our students, we know that here in our hearts, but what does that actually mean? And I can honestly say, I don't know. It's like we do know that it needs more, but maybe there's questions of why exactly, and how might we be able to articulate that to our students? Because again, especially you all know, some of our online students are adults who have actually well-developed time management skills based on their lives, their work lives, their family lives. And what does it mean that online needs more, and how do we help them with that? Well, I think we hit our 15 minutes. Katrina, do you have anything to conclude?
No, I think you just said everything I was going to say.
Yay.
Well, great. Well, I really want to thank both of you for giving such a fantastic and interesting presentation. As I mentioned before, everyone, please hold your questions until the end, and we will definitely come back to them. But we've got another interesting presentation coming up, Academic Mimicry, Ethos in the Age of Digital and Information Literacy. So I'd like to invite our next presenter to go ahead and share their screen and lead us in discussion.
Can you all hear me? Yes. And are you able to see me, or can you see the slides when I put them up now? Okay. Here's the link to the slides in case you want to view them separately. Oh, just one second. I'm sorry. Disregard that. Yeah, it's been a day. As you can tell, I'm a little bit ill today, so I've been hanging in there, and I hope you guys can understand me fine. My name is Stefanie Davis, and I'm low-income students from a variety of backgrounds. And I am also the lead instructor at a medium security men's prison. So I work in that context as well. I teach students both face-to-face, I teach hybrid, I teach online, and when I teach in the prison, I do not have access to any sort of technology besides PowerPoints. So I became interested in this topic of digital and information literacy because I was listening to some expert opinions related to the topic of global warming disinformation. My husband happens to be a chemist, and I was having dinner with some chemists, and I was hearing some pretty alarming stuff in the news, and I thought, okay, so let's go ahead and research this and see if this might be something that might jumpstart my students' interest in information literacy, digital literacy, news literacy. And so as I was researching, I quickly learned that there are a number of fake experts out there that are shaping the conversations about climate and climate change in America. And so what I decided to do was totally rework my first-year writing curriculum in order to focus on issues of disinformation, specifically related to global warming disinformation, as a way of teaching behaviors, ways of thinking about information that could help students to better navigate online contexts. And I focus predominantly on current news and research on climate change. So there's a lot of news literacy involved in what I'm doing. For the last 3 years, I've been revising my first year writing curriculum to integrate strategies to better understand current conversations, debates, and topics of interest within students' majors as well. So there's kind of two pieces to this. What I'm doing is I'm looking first at, okay, how do we know if something's good or not, and how do people trick you? And then the second piece of my curriculum focuses more on, okay, what are specific strategies I can use in order to figure out in a given area of interest what people are saying, what they're talking about, and what the research is showing. So what I found that students are very good at doing is they can navigate digital landscapes. So if I tell them to find the about page or the mission, they're able to do that sort of thing very easily. I've also gone ahead and piloted the tasks that were included in a study from Stanford on information literacy, and my students are able to knock those out of the park. So whereas Stanford found that a majority of students are not able to complete very basic tasks that involve digital literacy, information literacy, my students have been able to do those sorts of things. However, what I found is that a lot of my students struggle with expertise, figuring out, like, for example, what are the degrees, what are the areas of interest that people are in, and what makes someone an expert on a given topic. They've also struggled with even when they've had opportunities to research different experts, they still kind of, everybody sounds the same to them. Everybody kind of looks the same. And they are also, a lot of the reasons that they're struggling is that the people who are shaping a lot of our conversations in our country, unfortunately, are very good at behaving like experts, mimicking experts, looking like experts, and a lot of them have just enough of an expert background or expertise in a certain area that they can pass. And so that creates a bit of a problem when we're teaching students how to consume information online, how to be thoughtful users of information. So in 101, which is one of our series of first-year writing, we focus a lot on ethos in terms of trustworthiness, credibility, reliability, which I'm sure all of you do as well. The trick here is, though, I think historically I've taken this concept, I've underestimated its importance. In the sense that I thought that it was easy for students to tell what is trustworthy, what is credible, what is reliable. And maybe 15 years ago when I started teaching it was, I don't know, maybe I underestimated it. But once I started giving them tasks and studying what could they actually do, I found that this is an area that they struggle with consistently throughout. So again, I've reorganized my curriculum. I focus on a traditional research paper. I give them the sources. Some of them are fake news. Some of them are not. And we focus on digital news and information literacy and strategies for discovering what is good and what is not. Our Unit 2 and Unit 3 are focused more on strategies for how do we get to what is credible, how do we get around what all of these fake sources of information and really cut to where the experts are talking. So I've been talking a lot with my students about this idea of mimicry, which obviously is a biological term. And in the animal kingdom, of course, it benefits you to mimic something that is dangerous, right? It helps to protect you. What's interesting here is that in the academic sense, it's the dangerous people who are mimicking the scientists or the researchers. So the bad guys are mimicking the good guys, so to speak. So there are two types of mimicry in the natural world. And you have the Mullerian mimicry. I sound terrible, I apologize. Which is where animals group in coloring or something of that nature to signal, hey, we're bad, stay away from us, to help to protect them. And then there's the Batesian mimicry, which involves resembling something that is dangerous so that people won't eat you, okay? So when we think about one great example, and I think that this ties in closely with what I'm trying to teach my students in terms of information literacy. We have this example of the mimic octopus, which is unique in the sense that it, in terms of its behaviors, it has behaviors that help it to pass as something that's dangerous. And that's pretty unique to this particular species. And so here's an example of one in nature, and it's attempting to mimic something that's dangerous by how it's swimming so that it will protect itself. So it'll fold its arms behind its head, for example, to look like a banded sole, which is a poisonous flatfish, or it'll impersonate a venomous marine sea snake. And again, it's to protect itself. Now, we see this with these fake experts, particularly in issues related to science like global warming, pesticides, anything where you have the scientific community speaking out saying, listen, these things are not good, we need to do something, there's evidence, there's data. What we see are that there are these same voices that come out and they're able to mimic the real experts, but they'll say things that the experts won't would never support. And what I found from my students is that if the voice is loud enough, that the person must be an expert, or if the person is associated with an institute or writes for a publication, he must be an expert. Or if the person has a degree or an advanced degree in the right area, he must be an expert. Or if the person supports my preferred answer to a question, then he must be an expert. So these are the areas that they really struggle with. When we consider who our real experts are, these are three gentlemen that are experts in global warming disinformation. The gentleman on the left of the screen in the vertical rectangle, his name is William Rudiman. He's with the University of Virginia. In the upper corner, we have James Hansen. He worked for NASA. I think he's at Columbia now. And in the bottom right corner, we have Dr. Don Woobles. He's at the University of Illinois. He actually spoke at my campus this past semester. Students can't tell the difference between these gentlemen and these gentlemen. They can't identify or weed through, even with research, and figure out who is reliable and who is not. Thank you for the reminder. And so the problem that we have here is that there are behaviors or skills that we need to teach students, and yet as I've been doing this over 3 semesters, I tend to have somewhere between 75 and 100 students per semester. Consistently over and over and over again, they will confuse or not be able to successfully determine who is real and who is not. And my argument is, of course, that the fake experts that you're looking at on this particular slide are so good at mimicking the behaviors of real experts that they pass. They publish in newspapers, magazines, they're interviewed on the news. Many of them have close connections with the government and relationships established with particular representatives. And so to a novice, they look like an academic. They look like a scientist, they look like a researcher, because they're behaving in a lot of ways that you would expect those people to behave. So what I've discovered through my research with my students in the classroom is that they independently, oh, look at that nice typo, they will not click on an about section and read the mission. They will not research terms that they're unfamiliar with. They will not go off site to see what credible news sources are saying about a person or an organization. They will not go off site to see if expert groups support what the person is claiming. They will not go to a library and to see if there's an existing body of research that supports what the person is saying. So now back to this kind of behavior piece. So we have people that are mimicking behaviors that make them look credible when they aren't. And when we think about the Association for College and Research Libraries, the standards that they've set for us and outcomes that they're expecting us to reach, again, these are things that have been in our field that we've been teaching for many, many years. But what I'm interested in now is how do we facilitate and coach ways of thinking, ways of approaching problems, and cultivating behaviors that will get students to determine, who is real, who is fake, who should I trust, who should I ignore. And that has been the fundamental challenge here. It seems easier on the surface than what it is. There's some resistance to them mapping one behavior to the next task, to understanding that it's strategies that need to be applied and reapplied and tested over and over again. And so as I'm moving forward, I'm looking to cultivate, and I'm hoping this is where we're going to go, online tutorials for them that kind of give some examples and have them test things on their own, reinforcing strategies and behaviors, giving opportunities for them to see that there are connections from one task to the next. I'm also looking into ways to create the same experience for students who maybe are not in a digital environment like in the prison context, and need to master these skills because they will eventually be out on the streets and they need to understand how to better consume information. Let's see if it'll let me out of here. Okay, so I know we're probably running pretty close on time. Is that correct? Yes, T-minus 1 minute. So I want to be careful to be respectful and not go over. I hope that you guys could understand me. I sound terrible. And I'll look forward to hearing any questions that you have about the curriculum at the end of the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefanie. And I sure speak for all our colleagues in wishing you a speedy recovery. All right, that was a fascinating presentation. Let's move on to one more. Of course, I'm going to say every presentation is fascinating because this is our field, right? You know, of course it's fascinating. But our next presentation, open access, writing about writing theory, practice, and aspiration in first year writing. I'd like to invite our colleagues to go ahead and lead us to the next talk. Thank you.
Can you all hear me okay? Trent, I'm looking at you because I can't see anybody else. You can hear me okay? Okay, great. Hi, everybody. I am Jessica Kester. And man, I've been doing this for a long time. I have been teaching writing since 2006. For me, it feels like a long time because I have been teaching online from the very beginning. I've taught at Kaplan University, at Kendall College in Chicago, and now my home is at Daytona State College in Florida. And I'm also a doctoral student at University of Central Florida. And Scott, if you are out there, we are reading your book in an online pedagogy class this semester, which I'm really excited about because prior to this second semester as a PhD student, even though I've taught online for 10 years, I had never had any kind of formal education in teaching online besides the kind of mandatory training we have to do at Daytona State College, which I can talk more about if people are interested. But I've been really excited all day today to hear about the ways that we are thinking in the same ways, which is really cool to be dispersed all over the nation, all over the globe, and to be talking about metacognition and transfer and ethos and Kent Burke and conversation and writing studies and all kinds of things that are really reassuring that we're all kind of having the same conversation. So today, I want to introduce you to a particular problem that I'm hoping might also kind of resonate with you all. And this is a problem that I've been feeling for a while, and I'm going to go ahead and start my own time too so I can make sure I stay underneath my 15 minutes. But in first year writing or first year composition, so you'll hear me say FYC or FYW, in FYC, there's this tension between kind of theory, which is the why we do what we do, our aspirations, and a lot of folks, our keynote talked about this, and I think some folks, it was Shelley and Catrina who just spoke, who talked about not only is college kind of an aspirational space, right? We come because we want to grow or change or develop or get a better job, but first year writing in particular is often one of those first courses that students take. And when they take it online, it's often the first online course that they take. So we're in this really kind of aspirational, liminal, transitional space. And then there's what we're actually doing in the classroom. And so that's the practice, right? So there's the why, the theory, there's the big dreaming ideas. I want to change the world. I want to move mountains. I want to give people more choices. And then there's like the brass tacks where we're in the classroom and we're doing all this stuff. So I felt a tension between these things for a long time that I kind of wanted to explore with you guys today and tell you where I've come to in my own pedagogy and my own thinking about how to best kind of navigate this tension, this kind of busy intersection between theory, practice, and aspiration. So again, just to kind of flesh out what we mean by aspiration, I think this quote up here on the top left, this is President Truman's Commission on Higher Education in 1947 that basically enacted community colleges. And Daytona State is kind of a funky thing. We are mostly a two-year college doing direct connect to University of Central Florida and USF and UNF. But we also have a couple of four-year degrees in areas that are in demand in our region, like teaching and engineering and management. But we are an open access institution, which to me kind of is fundamental to our identity. So anybody from anywhere can take classes at Daytona State College. And again, the first class that many of our students are taking, especially in Florida, because Senate Bill 1720 basically eradicated developmental education for students who have a Florida high school diploma. So our class is one of those first classes that students are going to opt into. So lots of different skill levels, lots of different areas of expertise and knowledge coming from our students, in addition to our faculty, which is made up of people with degrees in English from a variety of fields. But so this picture down in the bottom left there, it's kind of what I feel like freshman composition as this liminal space, right? This place where our students are in transition. And it's really important to think about that as like an aspiration. Like we want to assist them in that transition. We want to help them make whatever choices, however they want to better their life or better their mind or give themselves more options. We want to be there to support them. And then there's this idea of demand for online courses at community colleges, which is really, really high. So at Daytona State College, our online sections fill up every single semester, so much so that until recently, we were opening new sections and they were filling within like 48 hours of them being open. This is for like ENC 1101 and 1102. But starting at the beginning of this year, our administration actually had our chairs and our deans put a hold on any new online sections, i.e. like creating more of them to meet student demand based on some performance gaps that we're seeing. We're seeing students not succeeding as well in online courses, especially those gateway courses. So like the ENC 1101 that I'm talking about, or even in our math courses. So performance gaps between face-to-face and online. And so then there's a study here that I'll give you the full reference to later at the end of my presentation by Zhu and Jaggers in 2014, which comes from the Journal of Higher Education. And it was a study of over 500,000 courses taken by over 40,000 community and technical college students in Washington State. And the numbers in Florida kind of mirror their own, which is across the board, students were doing not succeeding at the same rates in online and face-to-face. And this was particularly evident with our traditionally underserved populations, which is a population that Daytona State College definitely serves. So we have this problem that our pedagogy, our performance isn't quite meeting the student demand. And then adding into that so many different options for pedagogy. So you see down there on the bottom right, one of my favorite textbooks over the last couple of years has been these different approaches to teaching first-year composition that come from everywhere from Asao Inoue to Chris Anson to lots of other folks that I can't think of at the top of my head right now. But there's all this tension that I see, again, between like what we want FYC to be in online education, those gaps, and then all the different options we have to teach it, right? Which is both liberating and like debilitating at the same time. So that's kind of the problem where I'm at. So here's where I am kind of now in this journey. And I say kind of because from talking to folks and from being part of these great conversations like GSOLE, you always come away with new ideas. And so I'm always in transition. But for the last probably 5 years, I've been teaching with a writing about writing approach. So I'll call it WA. And the wowed by WA, I stole that phrase from Chris Anson. And I really was wowed by WA because as we're negotiating these aspirations and this theory and this practice, going back to research, going back to what we know about writing as a field, I often tell my students, we actually know things about writing, like we study it. And so to base my curriculum in that kind of pedagogy has been very empowering for me. It also kind of helps develop the kind of tension we often see. We've talked about it a little bit throughout this conference between people who find themselves in a writing program versus people that are in an English department, and that sometimes we get, for better or for worse, kind of categorized as skills only. And so writing about writing tries to reposition first-year composition as a content area, not just a place where we go and kind of remediate or teach skills. We've also talked a lot about metacognition during this conference. And because writing about writing asks students to read and write about writing, like the content of their course is scholarship and discussion about writing, that metacognition happens by the minute, right? Because we kind of force our students to study the subject and write about it. And so they know more, they do different. And so that facilitation of metacognition comes really, really easily with writing about writing. It also engages students in a subject in which they have expertise. So one of the things that was frustrating for me, especially in online, was facilitating students' acquisition of knowledge. Like they want to write about the keto diet or autism or public transit infrastructure. And I don't know anything about those things because I've spent most of my life studying writing, and they don't know anything about that either because they just decided they wanted to find out. But when we take a writing about writing approach everybody has expertise, because everybody has had a or most of my students have had a K through 12 education. And so they come to my space with ideas and opinions and horror stories about literacy, and to kind of re-engage them in their own stories and their own knowledge is really powerful. And that happens really naturally with writing about writing. And we can kind of share an expertise there, which is a nice way to kind of enact a feminist pedagogy and kind of sharing that power, saying our students have knowledge and so do we, and so does our field. So it also encourages transfer, which we've talked a lot about. This is an idea, Solomon and Perkins kind of talk about high road and low road transfer, and writing about writing allows students to pretty, I think, explicitly see the principles that guide writing, which is high road transfer, as opposed to kind of mechanically reproducing skills, low road transfer. We also talked about threshold concepts today, and writing about writing. Elizabeth Wardle and Doug Downs are the authors of this collection that I use in my face-to-face course. And Elizabeth Wardle writes a lot about threshold concepts and how writing about writing articulates with those really nicely. And as I kind of said a little bit before, one of the reasons I was wowed by WA is I got to talk about what I knew, what I love, what I've studied. I got to be a steward for my students and invite them into this conversation instead of trying to get myself up to speed on something like the keto diet, so that I could check, as Stefanie was mentioning, trying to figure out if the sources they were looking at were authoritative. That's hard when you don't know a lot about that subject area. Like, you don't know who the experts are in the keto diet. So it was hard to kind of instruct my students, especially in that online space. So while I came to writing about writing in a face-to-face class, I very quickly started to think about it for the online environment. And what I realized was just taking that book or taking an approach and kind of replicating it online was not the right way, that I wasn't using the affordances of the platform. And so really quickly, I began to think about open access materials, because open access materials really do allow students to negotiate with other spaces besides our LMS. And that was really interesting to me, and besides a traditional textbook. And when I was looking at open access, I found that when instructors were talking about open access materials, which also lots of great benefits, they're free, right? So students don't pay for textbooks, which is huge if you're serving an underserved population, especially those with lower socioeconomic situations. But looking at this comes from a study from the Babson Research Group here on the left, and they publish one of these every single year. It's like the state of open access materials. And you can see there on the left that students or instructors who are asked about why they might not use open access materials talk about there being a difficulty in finding what they needed. That's the number one reason, right? Lack of resources for my subjects, which kind of go together, right? And so I really quickly realized, oh my gosh, writing about writing has great open access resources. So there are some that are listed here on the right that I'm going to talk about today for just a few minutes, including one being our own institutional libraries, right? It's pretty great. Okay, but I want to get to the kind of the meat and potatoes, because I love the kind of practical element. There's a lot of words on the page, so forgive me. But I want to actually play you a little thing that I recorded earlier, because I was worried about how, if I was going to show you how to negotiate some of these open access resources, the technology would get in my way as far as like things not loading. So I'm going to play this for you. And what this is kind of a little mini lesson on how I use open access resources to teach writing about writing, all the way from, again, kind of the first thing I would have them read to things I would have them watch, which we also talked about multimodality being really important and an affordance of that online space. So they'll watch some things, and then there are some writing options there. And of course, I'm hoping you guys will know, in between all this reading, there is certainly discussion going on, like in my LMS, but I didn't want to kind of load you down with even more of that kind of scaffolding. So I'm going to play this and then let you guys see how this might work. So I want to show you how this would look. So right now, I would have clicked on backpacks versus briefcases. You can have students use the link, or you can download the PDF. I kind of like them using the link, that way they can negotiate the interface. So this is the Writing Spaces interface. And I always direct students to go to downloads. That's one of the easiest ways to get to the text. And there's the backpacks versus briefcases right there. And then from there, students can download this chapter. You'll see they can access the text, they can print it, they can mark it up with like an Adobe Reader, however they like. If they want to get back and get to that next one, which is Carrie Dirk's Navigating Genres. So there's a keyword tagging ability here in this interface, which makes it really easy to use. So I can go to genre, and I know that Navigating Genres is that Carrie Dirk piece. I could also go in again to downloads and get to it that way. And look for Carrie Dirk that way. Right here, Carrie Dirk, Navigating Genres. So lots of different ways to get to the pieces that you'd like your students to get to. And again, all open access, all the things they need to do a correct APA or MLA in-text citation or works cited entry are there as well. And so then I want to show you the interface for writing comments. So this is writing comments. And again, you can get students directly to the place that you want by giving them the link. And so they can also get there by looking at the different chapters. So I'd link them directly to reviews and recommendations, which is what I wanted them to read as we're thinking about the rhetorical situation and how we're going to eventually review some videos on YouTube that deal with the rhetorical situation. But this is this interface, and again, lots of different chapters. You can get to all kinds of stuff from writing comments. And then for the YouTube videos, I wanted to show you a little bit of the different kinds of videos that I asked students to look at and then eventually either review, recommend, or do a rhetorical analysis of. And it's all within that writing about writing kind of pedagogy that I talked about. So there's one by...
Hello, my name is Professor Cruz Medina.
There's Mr. Cruz. Then there's one, this is particularly terrible.
Not all situations can be defined as rhetorical situations.
That's Audiopedia, and then we've got one from Purdue Owl, and then finally from University of Baltimore, University of Maryland, Baltimore, on the rhetorical situation. You can see Spencer Clausen down there. So just to give you a little bit of idea of what this would look like from the student view as you click through all of these different open access resources. So there are some ideas for using those open access materials in like a kind of snapshot of maybe a little bit of my curriculum that deals with the rhetorical situation. And again, we had talked a lot about multimodality. I always think about, as I have students interact with these spaces, how they're learning about how people use images and white space in not only the readings that they're seeing online, but also in the videos. And then I give them lots of options for how to write about them. And then I wanted to talk about don't do that. I want to talk about, sorry guys, I'm trying to advance the slide and it doesn't want to do that. There it is. Last one I want to talk about with my 1 minute left, I think, right, Trent, is the way we can engage in kind of current debate in our field with our students using the library, for example. So right now, if any of you guys have been on the WPAL listserv, you know that there was lots of controversy about Vershawn Ashanti Young's CFP for the 2019 Cs. And it prompted a lot of debate about whether we should teach code switching or code meshing in first-year composition or in academic writing or in academic spaces. And there are two really good articles that kind of show two sides of this debate. And I have my students go to the library and find the Wheeler article and the Young article, take them back to the writing commons to get some ideas about how to frame an argumentative thesis or how to get in on a debate. Our keynote speaker was talking about the idea of coming in on a conversation. This puts them like right in the middle of a conversation and they can kind of dip their oar in, as Susan Thomas was saying. I had them go to YouTube and have some experiences looking at code switching in a Key and Peele's sketch, and then looking at Vershawn Ashanti Young's actual CFP, and then lots of writing that they can do about that. So I think I did it. I didn't go over. Those are my references and more if you'd like them, and thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Jessica. Once again, fascinating presentation. You know, we started a few minutes late, but we do have time for questions. If you'd like to ask questions of any of our presenters, please unclick your mic and do so, or post them in the chat window. Does anybody have a question?
Yeah, I had a question for Stefanie. I actually do a little bit of work on fake experts myself, and so I'm curious what behaviors that you notice fake experts mimicking.
Well, it's really interesting. So I've been doing, like I mentioned, developing this curriculum for over 3 years. When I first started, they were just out in kind of news outlets, maybe a little bit on TV. But as I've been watching the Heartland Institute, the Cato Institute, various think tanks that are driving the disinformation on global warming, what I'm seeing now is they're trying to brand themselves more like academics. And one of the key behaviors that I'm seeing is that they'll put things that look almost like a CV online. They'll try to make it seem as though they're really scientists or researchers. Mm-hmm. And so it can be very difficult then for a student to determine, what's the difference between Paul C. Chip Knappenberger, who, is one of the, fake experts that's out there, and William Rudiman, who is a legitimate climate expert from the University of Virginia. So they've been engaging for a long time in a lot of commentary on the subject in ways that experts would in the media, in the news. But now they're trying to almost mimic like they are researchers. And I suspect that a large part of that is happening because Naomi Oreskes, published a book about it, and also the documentary, like word is getting out that people are doing this. And so now they're trying new tricks, new behaviors.
That makes a lot of sense. Just to clarify, because I looked one of your images up at the end of your speech there, and Knappenberger here is actually associated with the Cato Institute, which suggests to me that the problem may not just be, the fake experts, but like the fake sources of expertise, that these are think tanks which are trafficking in disinformation. Yes?
Exactly. And we talk a lot with my students about, what does the word fellow suggest or institute? And they use a lot of words that are our words. And the students can make the association, academic. And so they're very good at the language, the way that they present themselves, the images. Think tanks, yes. And so, they're doing a lot they look like faculty pages from the University of Virginia. And so it's not surprising that a student can't figure out the difference between the Cato Institute and the University of Virginia.
Yeah, sure thing. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Okay, other questions? Okay, question takes up Catrina and Shelley's topic. What structures do you all build into your courses to help students manage their time?
Amy, this is Shelley. Sorry, I don't have my camera on anymore. I've, like other people, been dealing with the plague. Not enough, especially with the data, not enough. I'll start with saying what we're currently doing, and Catrina might add with some of the ideas that we've had. But right now, we just basically, the first week, have them map out a weekly calendar that tries to take account for their life, and then try maybe a couple weeks later to have them return to it and see how things are going. And then if you will, but it's not explicit, just that there's scaffolding built into the projects and traditional writing project style, if that makes sense. But I think part of what we're seeing with this data and the scholarship is that it needs to be more explicit. I will shut up now. Catrina.
So in the fall, in addition to that, in the fall, I started making I teach 7.5-week online composition classes, and I started building in 3 due dates a week, giving the students the idea that they should be doing work every day. And I have found I'm running it for the 3rd time that way, and students are less panicked about the amount of work that they have to do in an online writing class. So I do think that while it's not an explicit, like, this is how you manage your time, it is I'm going to manage your time for you, almost, by taking the assignments and, having 2 or 3 due every 2 to 3 days instead of, 4 assignments due twice a week in a condensed or an accelerated class like that. But yes, more. We need to be doing more than that, and more explicitly teaching the kinds of behaviors that we are seeing in the time management literature.
Other questions for our panelists? We technically are at our time, but I think we have a minute or so for another question, if anybody has one. No? You sure?
Well, oh, I'm sorry, I'm reading the comment. Did have a question for Shelley and Catrina. So one of the issues that I struggle with, partly because I'm in a 2-year institution and I'm expected to do a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of teaching, with the multiple deadlines, that's an issue that I've struggled with because it's more work. I have found that it has been more work for me, and so then it's been adding additional time that can be difficult to manage. Do you all have strategies for how you do that in a way that's actually, I don't know if you get at what I'm getting, but is more manageable, or have you found that you're overwhelmed by those additional deadlines?
Well, I will say that I haven't actually added work.
Okay.
So I took the work that the students were already doing and I just divided it up in a way that made sense.
Okay.
To me, as far as the scaffolding and the progression of the course, so that, instead of saying that there's an assignment and 2 discussion boards and then this thing in Google Drive due on Thursday, they have a discussion and an assignment due Tuesday, and then the Google Drive and the other discussion due Thursday. So it's actually helped me manage my time better because then I'm not grading those 4 assignments in a smaller amount of time because I try to give it back by the next due date. So it has actually made it so that I have fewer assignments, less time, but it helps me to not also get stressed by, oh my goodness, I have so many. I teach a 4-4 right now, which is a lot less than I was teaching at the community college. But even then, I think if I had 3 due dates a week, it would have felt less stressful because I'm not adding. That's the key, is not adding just because you're adding due dates. Don't add extra work.
Yeah, I've seen an instructor that's actually kind of imploded because she was doing that here, which made me kind of pull back from multiple deadlines because I was watching her. She couldn't execute what she had planned.
Yeah, one thing I did do, so if it was an assignment that had maybe multiple steps or multiple layers, I maybe took that and divided it into 2. But I think I only did that in 1 case. Everything else was just take it and divide it into, manage their time for them, literally. Like you have to do this before you do that.
That's smart.
Okay, well, I would like to, we've gone over a few minutes, and I would like to thank everybody for participating. Excuse me, I'm tongue-tied. I'd also like to give a special thanks to our presenters for giving us excellent presentations and also providing their slides to us so that we may refer to them later. So be sure to check the chat box for that. Other than that, I wish everybody the best, and please don't forget the poster sessions that are happening after this. Thank you.